For practice activity 3C, we'll continue working with the same drawing we've been working with for 3A and 3B, and we're going to now modify the surface and improve on the triangulation that's there. We're going to find some errors, we're going to correct them, and we'll continue to refine the surface. So we'll start by selecting the surface in model space. So I'm going to click on any one of the contour lines that will select the surface, X topo. With that selected from the contextual modify options relating to surfaces, we're going to go to surface properties. We'll go to the definition tab. And within the build options, we're going to set this to, it says copy deleted dependent objects. We're going to set that to yes. Okay. We'll click OK. Apply and then OK. And right away we'll be prompted to rebuild the surface. Choose to rebuild the surface. And we will get some events relating to break lines being crossed. So we'll have an issue with break lines being crossed, and we will correct that in another few steps. So for now, I'm going to close out that event viewer, and we're going to move on to task 2. Now, on the eastern edge of the surface, we have some triangulation where the edges they're very close together. So we're going to zoom in. All right, now it is very difficult to see all of these fine lines, but basically there's a series of diagonal lines, not diagonal, but inclined lines along the eastern edge right in here that we're going to actually delete. We're going to select the surface. Let's escape. Select the surface again. And now where we have our modify options that relate to surfaces, we're going to expand edit surface, and we're going to choose delete line. And we're going to very carefully select these inclined lines that are so close together. And you might not do it all in one setting, but we're going to delete these. All right, after we've deleted those, we're going to zoom on out a bit. And we still have more to remove. So if you look at the image on page 52, we're looking to clean up the inclined lines that run over to the right. So we'll continue trimming. So again, we'll select the surface. Oops. All right, with the surface selected, we go to edit surface and we go to delete lines. And we'll continue to delete the inclined lines. All right. All right, I'll check tin surface. And now I'm going to hit enter. And those lines have been removed. So I'm working towards removing the odd triangular mesh sections that exist outside the limits of the property. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Don't agonize over which little triangle wedge belongs to which, because in another step we're going to take it a step further and refine it even more. So let's do a little more here. I'm going to select the surface again. Oops. All right, with the surface selected, I'll go to Edit Surface, I'll delete Line, and then I'll go down and I'll work a little bit on the southeastern series of edges here. I'll remove, oops, not that one. If you inadvertently select one you didn't intend to, click on it again, and that will unselect it. All right, having done that, oops. Okay. All right, at this point, I've deleted quite a few of the extra or unnecessary triangulation elements that are on the outside of the eastern edge of our piece of property. I'm going to hit escape to exit this command. I'll hit escape twice, and now I'm going to move on to task 3 on page 53. So we were able to delete lines that made up the mesh that extended over the eastern edge of the property, but now we're going to refine it with another option. So we're going to, well, they have us selecting a preset view named Surface Edit. I'm not quite sure if it's zoomed in enough for me. However, let's go ahead and look at our pre-created views. Let's go to the View tab. And then we'll go to our View Manager, and we're looking for Surface Edit as our named view. With Surface Edit selected, we'll set that current. Okay, there we have our view, Surface Edit. Again, we'll select one of the contour lines to select the whole surface. Once we've done that, we get the contextual tab of options. And within the modify group, now we're going to go look at our add data options. So expanding, add data, we're going to select the boundaries option. Now, we're going to use a boundary to define the limits of our triangular mesh. So we're going to name this boundary limits. And for the type, we'll make sure that is set to outer because we're defining the outer limits or the outer boundary of our surface. We'll want to make sure the non-destructive break line option is checked. All right, we're going to click OK to accept those settings. And now we have to select. The object we need to select is actually the red polyline. Let's zoom in a little bit. That runs around the entire perimeter. So I'm going to select that red polyline that represents our boundary. And now I'll zoom on out and we can see that the mesh has now been trimmed so that it no longer runs over to the east of our boundaries. So using the boundary in this case was more effective than individually deleting mesh components. So we've used the red polyline that defines the boundary to trim the surface. If we were to say select that red polyline and modify it possibly by dragging and moving a grip, as soon as we do that, we go to the Toolspace Prospector tab under Surfaces and view that surface, in this case ex topo. You'll see that there is the notice or the warning that the surface is out of date. If we right click on that, we have the option to rebuild, or we have the option to rebuild automatically. So we'll select the option to rebuild automatically, and the surface will be recreated. All right, I'm going to undo that last two steps. All right, having undone that, I'll save the drawing and I'll move on to task 4. For task 4, we're going to go to the View Manager and we're going to make the View Surf Elevation Edit the active view. With that selected, we'll set that current. And we've zoomed in on an unusual surface object. All right, and I can see I do have some unusual data there. I'm going to select a topographical line to select the whole surface. I'll right click, and from my shortcut options towards the bottom, I'm going to choose Object Viewer. This gives me a window, I can overlay and I can drag it out of the way and I can rotate and see what my elevation data looks like. So I'm going to click and drag and orbit this. And I can see right away I have a bad elevation. So typically when you're working on a project, you pretty much know within what range the elevation values should fall. And it's not unusual to have bad elevation information. And that is exactly what we have here. We have one random point way out there that's very high. So we're going to refine our settings so we throw out points that are outside of what's expected. So I'm going to close out of my object viewer. And now I'll go into my surface. I'll select a topographical line to select it. From my Modify panel, I'll choose Surface Properties. I'm going to go to my Statistics tab, and I'm going to look at the General Statistics, and I'm looking specifically for elevation information. So I can see that my minimum elevation here is 115 feet, and my maximum is 492, and that's kind of an extreme difference. So if I'm familiar with this project and the geography in the area, I would know that my range should really be between 100 and 330 feet. So I'm going to go into my definition tab and I'm going to define what data I want to include or what data I want to exclude. So where I see under the build options in the definition tab, exclude elevations greater than and exclude elevations less than, I'm going to put some information in there. So I'm going to choose to exclude elevations less than 100 feet. And I'm going to set exclude elevations greater than. I'm going to scroll on over and set that to yes. So we'll throw out elevations that are extremely high and not normal to this area. And we'll set that to 330 feet. All right, having done that, we'll click OK. And we'll be prompted to rebuild the surface, which we will. And we are going to, in our panorama view, go to Action, go down to Clear All Events, and close that out. So now we have eliminated that extremely tall point. It was what, 500 and some odd feet above sea level. So we've defined the limits where all points should be, and data that's outside of those limits are assumed to be bad and they are not factored in. All right, so having done this, I'm going to go back to the preset view, surface edit. With that view selected and current, I'm going to go to my Tool Space Prospector tab. I'm going to expand surfaces, and I'm going to select the X-Topo surface. With X-Topo surface selected, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to choose Properties. And when I do that, I'll see a list of all of the different operations that have been applied to this surface, and I can uncheck the Add Boundary to remove that. The step is still there, and I can just temporarily shut it off, which is what I'm going to do. So I've unchecked it. I'm going to click Apply. I'm prompted to rebuild the surface, which I will. I'll click OK, and now my boundary, I have that lower right side edge of the property or the surface spilling over to the right of our boundaries. So from my panorama view, I will clear all events. I'll close that out. I'll go back to X-Topo in the Prospector tab. I'll right-click with X-Topo selected, choose Surface Properties, and I'll check Add Boundary. Again, I will apply it. I'll rebuild the surface, click OK, and now I've got my boundary back. And this is a dynamic type operation. If I modify that boundary, if I make it smaller or wider, the surface will automatically be updated so that it's always within the limits of those boundaries. All right, well, now I'm going to create a composite surface. I'm going to combine data from two different surfaces and add it to a new surface. So I'm going to go to the preset view, Survey Main, with that current. I'm going to highlight the surfaces collection. I'll right click and I'll choose to create surface. And now I'm going to create a new surface and I'm going to name it Existing Site. So I'm going to click in the name field in the Create Surface dialog box and I'm going to type in Existing Site. Once I've done that, I'll click in my description and I'm going to give it the description composite surface of X-Topo and X-Road. Once I've done that, I'll make sure my contours, the style is 2 foot and 10 foot background. I'll click OK. I've created the surface and it's now listed in the Tool Space Prospector tab under Surfaces, but of course there are no points on it at this time. So what we're going to do now in the Tool Space Prospector tab with Surfaces selected, we'll see down below in our preview area, we'll have our surfaces. So we have Existing Site, we have X-Road, and we have Topo. We're going to modify the style of existing X-Road and X-Topo. So I'm going to select X-Road. I'll hold down the Shift key. I'll select X-Topo. I'm going to scroll on over to the style, and I'm going to put my cursor right over the style heading, and I'm going to right-click and choose Edit. I'm going to edit the style for those two surfaces. I'm going to set those two surfaces to No Display. Once I've done that, they'll be hidden. So the surfaces are still there, but they're set to not display. I've created that new surface, which we've indicated is going to be a composite and contain the data from the X-Road and the X-Topo. So now I'm going to go expand my surfaces. I'm going to expand Existing Site, and then I'll expand the definition. I'll go down in the list of definition options for Existing Site, and I'll click Edit. With Edit selected, I'm going to right-click, and from my shortcut options, I'm going to choose Paste Surface. And I'm going to choose to paste the surface data from the X-Road and the X-Topo. So I hold down the Shift key, I select X-Road, I select X-Topo, I click OK, and it pastes that surface information from those two surfaces into our newly created surface Existing Site. Now, having done that, we pasted them in the random or the default order, we're going to modify that. So we're going to choose this existing site. From our surfaces, we'll right-click, we'll go into surface properties. When we look at the order of operations, you can see that the X-road data was pasted first, followed by X-topo. We can reorder these. I'm going to highlight the level X-topo. We'll use the up arrow to move it so that it was done first. You'll notice right away at the left, I have the little yellow triangle with the exclamation point, which is indicating we need to rebuild the surface because the data has changed. And so we'll click to do that, and we'll click OK. So we've created a composite. Existing site now contains all of the surface data that had been previously in X-road and X-topo. We applied a boundary. We used the delete line to tweak some of the really closely spaced triangle wedges in the lower right-hand corner. And we modified the properties by limiting the size or the longest edge of the triangle. So our surface is much more accurate than it was when we started. So we're going to save this, and we'll prepare to move along to activity D.